Hello, and welcome to Exposed News Outlet. My name is Andrea, and I'm your host. I have a lot to get into today and a lot to touch on, but before I do, if I could just ask that you please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and be sure to select all under the notifications for all my latest updates and videos, and be sure to smash the like button as well. Also, if you could share my videos on your social media platform, that would be amazing. With the rising cost, I did have a GoFundMe that I wanted to speak about. If you could help support independent, truth-driven journalism to empower a transgender voice in the fight for democracy and civil rights. In today's world, where misinformation spreads like wildfire and hate-fueled narratives dominate the headline, fact-based news that challenges the status quo and brings clarity to the stories that matter. As a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I understand firsthand the need for honest, inclusive, and empowering journalism that defends civil rights, equality, and freedom. But to make this vision a reality, I need your help. As an independent journalist, I'm building a media platform that cuts through the noise and provides real, unbiased coverage, especially on issues that affect marginalized communities, including transgender people. The equipment and software needed to produce high quality content, ensure professional editing, and run a creditable platform are costly. And every day I work towards making this a sustainable reality. Your donation will help secure the essential tools required to invest in professional equipment and software to produce clear, engaging, and impactful videos and articles, counter the rising tide of disinformation and anti-transgender propaganda with facts, truth, and personal stories that empower those most affected. Keep independent journalism alive by ensuring that voices like mine and others from the marginalized communities are heard, respected, and have the resources to make a real impact. This is not just about supporting my platform. This is about standing up for the values that shape a healthy democracy: truth, transparency, civil rights, and equality. In a world where mainstream media is often more compromised or corrupted, independent journalists have a crucial role in making sure that the facts reach the people whom need them the most. Together, we can build a future where every voice is heard, where misinformation doesn't have the final say, and where civil rights, especially for transgender people and the marginalized community, are not just protected but celebrated. Donate today and help me continue to fight for truth, freedom, and democracy. Your support is more than just a financial contribution. It's a commitment to a more informed, more inclusive world. Thank you for believing in the power of independent journalism. I do have a GoFundMe and the link in the description box below for those who are able to help. And thank you very much. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Republican Mr. Pat Fallon and the current acting director of the Secret Service, Ronald Rowe, got into a shouting match at a hearing recently of the Butler, Pennsylvania incident where Trump was shot at. However, this wasn't what the shouting match was over. Instead, he was shouting and trying to push false narratives of the Secret Service director and his intentions without even knowing specific details of the day. As the same party that touted and slammed Democrats for wanting to defund the police in the wake of the George Floyd death that shocked the nation and led to mass protests. And even in this election that we just had, Republicans had pulled that back out of the playbook and dusted it off and used these allegations on several Democrats, including Kamala Harris, which I saw repeated political ads against, using those same lies. Also, Christina Bohannon from Iowa, she was in a local state race, and they also used those allegations against her as well. Then, with the same breath, They want to turn around and attack our service members that literally protect them and our assets daily, including the president and vice president and even the president elect. They want to attack the very people that protect them and accuse them of absurdities and literally harass them to the point where it will soon affect turnover or even ability to staff these positions. Nonetheless, the morale. And now they want to disrupt the very institutions that have thwarted some tremendously devastating catastrophes. And historically speaking, the FBI has always had a Republican leader, despite what they try to let on. Always since it was founded, every single leader was a Republican. And most of the employees are as well. However, not all of them are, fortunately. But it's absurd for anyone, and especially for Republicans, to be making such accusations. If anything, it's partisan more so towards the favoring the right than the left. And yet, you haven't heard the Democrats crying these absurdities, even after the American sitting president, whom is a Democrat, had his own house raided while in office. Frankly, I'm tired of the propaganda and cult ideology and blatant bigotry and white nationalist, toxic indoctrination, and frankly, domestic terrorists as they seek violence, destruction, and madness, mayhem, and chaos. Just because you can yell and scream in the confines of the House of Representatives doesn't mean you're strong, nor does it mean you're right. In fact, it's rather foolish, just like it's foolish for you to ask a question and then speak over the person as they answer you, just because you don't like the answer they give. Or better yet, because you want to spin propaganda and get a soundbite in. This is just lame and frankly not what the American people voted for when they voted for Trump. And they certainly didn't vote for this when they voted for Kamala either. And no one voted for Elon Musk at the end of the day, or these sociopath, malignant, narcissist, psychopath billionaires that are trying to run the government from a shadow government. And it's alarming how many of them would sell us out if Elon gave them the right amount. And you can see this in real time as they all lust and fawn over Elon. Some degenerates like Marjorie Trader Green and other MAGA cultists are trying to say that Elon should be the Speaker of the House. Because at the end of the day, most of them don't understand what government is truly for. And instead, they play games with Americans' livelihoods. And what's sad is that technically anyone can be the Speaker of the House. They don't even have to be in Congress to be Speaker of the House, which is technically alarming to me. I just feel like a lot of these laws and regulations might have worked when it was a young country, but in modern day, there should be more regulations and laws put in place about who can run and who can't, at least at the very minimal, have prerequisitions, just like they do at any typical job, a profession. And they certainly should have laws put in place for these corporations that literally buy the election. I certainly don't think that a felon should ever be president or hold a position of power. Certainly not someone that has fraud charges. But at this point, the Republicans like to push deception and use coded language or secrecy to push a secret agenda where they say one thing publicly and do another, or they use deflection and chaos or madness to blame their own malicious intentions and actions on the opposition. Anyone that respected the police or Secret Service or public service officials wouldn't make political stunts or shouting matches to try to smear the very ones protecting them, such as Pat Fallon in this clip, where he gets into a shouting match with Ronald Rowe and accuses him of wanting to be seen in photo ops on the remembrance of 9/11. Just bizarre behavior. Let me play the clip.
So I got another question for you. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Was that the remembrance of September 11th?
It was.
Was it in New York?
It was at Ground Zero.
Okay. Who's usually at an event like this closest to the President of the United States, security-wise?
The SAC of the detail.
Special agent in charge of the detail. Were you the special agent in charge of the detail that day?
Actually, let me address this. Could you please, staff, leave that? Oh, no, leave that one up with the circle around me. Thank you. So actually, Congressman, what you're not seeing is the SAC of the detail out of the picture's view. And that is the day where we remember the more than 3,000 people that have died on 9/11. I actually responded to Ground Zero. I was there going through the ashes of the World Trade Center. I was there at Fresh Kills.
I'm not asking you that. I'm asking you,
Congressman.
were you the special agent in charge?
To show respect
You were not.
for a Secret
That's
Service
a bunch of
member
horse hockey.
that died on 9/11.
Oh, that you're trying to be.
Do not invoke 9/11 for political purposes.
Oh, that not. I'm invoking this.
You are, sir.
Gentlemen,
and you are out of line.
I would like to ask him a question.
Please.
You are
Order.
out of line,
Order.
Congressman.
Don't
Way
try
out
to
of
bully
line.
me. I am an elected member of Congress, and I'm asking you a serious question, and you are
I
playing
am a
politics.
public servant who has served this nation and
You
spent
won't answer the
time
question.
on our country's darkest
Mr.
day.
Chairman,
Committee
you
will
not
come
answer-
to
Do not
order.
politicize it.
Committee will come to order.
I'm asking you serious questions for the American people, and they're very simple. They're not trick questions. Were you the special agent in charge that
No,
day?
I wasn't. I was there
Oh, no,
representing
Mr.
the
Chairman,
United
I'm
States
just asking
Secret
you yes or
Service,
no.
sir.
Mr. Fallon, your
and
time's
did not
expired.
affect protective
Fallon,
You know
operations.
why you were
Time's
there?
expired.
Because you wanted to be visible, because you are auditioning for this
I was
job
there to
that
pay
you're not gonna
respect for a
get
fallen
till
member of
January
this
20th.
agency.
You endangered
You are
President
out of
Biden's
line,
life,
Congressman.
Vice President
You are out of
Harris's
line.
life, because you put those agents out of position.
Mr.
Did you have a
Chairman.
radio with
Mr.
you?
Fallon,
Did
your
you wear a
time
vest?
has
Did you have a
expired.
weapon?
Mr.
No.
I did, sir, and you are out of line.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
please.
All right. And we are back
You're
in
a
order
bully.
now. We are back in order now.
Thank you.
Mr. Moskowitz, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
One of the latest nominations that was announced earlier this month, December 12th to be exact, to lead the broadcaster Voice of America, which has historically delivered an unbiased and honest, and they promised since day one that they would always report the facts, whether it was good news or bad news, and that they would always report facts and not sugarcoat or deceive internationally. And at a time when worldviews are changing and authoritarian regimes are spreading across the globe, with them spreading disinformation like wildfire and propaganda and straight up lies meant to sow distrust and divide and conquer tactics to control the masses. Oligarchs are emerging and literally trying to influence and indoctrinate the globe, stretching beyond the American borders, worldwide to the global markets as they push a radical right agenda. And frankly, Putin has already been doing this with hacking and bots, as well as North Korea, China, and of course Israel has had their hand too, more recently with the Netanyahu, all being led by wannabe dictators and strongmen, or wannabes rather. There is nothing free or rewarding about a dictatorship or an authoritarian regime. The only person that wins is the authoritarian. I mean, wake up. And yet, many of these ignorant clown puppets act like somehow they're going to come up or come out on top or be better off somehow in some way. Many of them too foolish to realize they were played once more. Just like the first time when Trump was in office, when he promised all these same things that he repeated again this time. The same things that he failed to deliver on the last time, and frankly, he's never really planned on even having to execute or deliver. Instead, he just feeds the crowd what they want to hear, and many things that they could probably live without. And then, when the time comes around, it's always 2 weeks later, just 2 weeks later. Give me 2 more weeks. Much like Infrastructure Week that went on, and countless others. And yet, we find that Trump hasn't even made it to the White House yet. And already it's chaos, mayhem, and dysfunction And that would be an understatement, actually, as the Republicans are unable to lead and unable to agree on anything. But what else should we expect from a party that's completely sold the American people out to the highest bidders and whom have no real policies to help the American people? Just distractions. Congress almost came to a government shutdown because the bipartisan bill that the Republicans had authored, by the way, was about to pass, and Elon Musk at the 11th hour, the billionaire whom is the world's richest man, whom can't seem to stop trying to direct world policies when he knows absolutely nothing about government. And frankly, he has no business in government, especially when he's a walking, talking conflict of interest. And frankly, these billionaire oligarchs shouldn't be able to take the world hostage simply because they're rich. Elon Musk wasn't elected by the American people, and frankly, most Americans don't want him in there. Seems to be that the Republicans, whom would sell their soul for very low wages, who would sell their soul for just about any amount of money, these are the individuals that seem to enjoy him in there the most, or even want to throw around absurdities about him becoming Speaker of the House, which is frightening in and of itself. Especially since, like I said before, you don't have to be a member of Congress to be the Speaker of the House. And especially since he's an immigrant from South Africa, he technically can't be president in the USA, but he could be Speaker of the House. However, he couldn't and shouldn't, which, I mean, right there, it doesn't even make sense. Because if you're the third in line to the presidency, but yet you couldn't be president because you're an immigrant, how could you be Speaker of that? There's just so many things wrong with that. And however, he shouldn't be, and frankly, just because one is a billionaire doesn't give them authority to control everything, nor does it mean that they would even be any good at it. It's not like running a business. And frankly, you're working for the American people, not the other way around. Check out this clip from our friends on NBC, Ari Melber.
Unelected, largely unaccountable billionaires are getting special access to this incoming Trump administration and Senate Republicans and others. At the same time that the Republican Party actually just did something politically that was a big deal. They built and grew their support among working class, sometimes called blue collar Americans. And so this is an important story where politically the Republicans had good news. You could see that in the exit polls. We covered this economy election from election night on. But that political step was, by all accounts, Republican voters, observers, supposed to be matched by some sort of delivery mechanism for those working class Americans. So keep that in mind as you look at scenes like this, as the world's richest man, Elon Musk, makes this sort of big kind of hero's welcome entrance into the buildings and around the Capitol and the Senate because he's holding private meetings with top Republicans. You could also see he's joined by a very successful, very wealthy businessman, Vivek Ramaswamy. MAGA figures that are heading up a group outside the government that's literally named after a commercial product that one of them's involved in that they say will help improve the government. So the self-dealing, in a sense, has already begun when it comes to branding. And they want to do enormous cuts, as much as hundreds or even $500 billion out of the annual budget if they could get Congress to agree. It's unclear how they would do this and what services or programs might be slashed for Americans in states, red, blue, and in between, and certainly in those working class areas where Republicans did improve their vote totals. We also don't know what rules they intend to test when you see headlines like this. And the DOGE plan that you see up top, that is a DOGE plan to reform government. That is one of Elon Musk's business ventures that he makes money off of. It has to do with cryptocurrency, but it's no different than saying, business-wise, the Tesla plan or the Coca-Cola plan. So again, buyer beware when the people telling you they're going to save you money are already using their new program to promote themselves and their own business interests. Now, the rules are designed in most government areas to avoid partisan purges of career workers when new administrations come in. So if one of the things they want to do is not only cut programs like health care or a safety net or money that might go to you or your parents, but they also want to try to cut down on the federal workforce, on public servants. Well, it's not even clear how far they can get with that, again, unless they were able to change some pretty major laws. So it's more than just annual budgeting. As for Elon Musk, I'll tell you one thing. He may not have been in politics long enough to know that this is not helpful to the Senate Republicans he's meeting with. He has admitted all of this would cause pain.
We have to reduce spending to live within our means. That necessarily involves some temporary hardship, but it will ensure long-term prosperity.
Elon Musk there, Trump ally, is referring to decreasing government spending on certain things. He has not said it should reduce spending on the government money that goes to him, which we'll get to. He's not going to feel hardship. And when you look at all of this, there is a major conflict of interest here. In other words, you can try to track this story on one of two levels. The first level is how much should the government have cut out? And it's perfectly valid and often the position of more conservative politicians, Republicans, to cut government spending in some ways. You've heard that before. The second level is who's doing this? And do you think it's going to be good for you as a taxpayer to have a Coca-Cola or Tesla or Doge plan that's already self-dealing, overseen by someone who has all these conflicts of interest? Elon Musk controls companies that have ongoing contracts and taken a lot of money from 12 different federal agencies. Again, he has not publicly said that the reduction in spending should include reducing any of those agencies' money that goes to his companies, which enrich him, have helped, among other things, make him the richest man in the world. 11 agencies have oversight investigations into Musk's business. Now, I'm not saying that's a terrible thing. They are supposed to do that. There are regulators that deal with many different businesses. But now he is trying to kind of come through with the back door and oversee their funding, right? So that's a conflict. Musk is also talking to Republican leaders who have power potentially as well in a different mechanism over those investigations. Now, there is not current reporting, in all fairness, that these conflicts, that's a situation, have turned into some sort of active malfeasance or scandal. And after all, we're very new here. This Doge thing, which you can think of as a Coca-Cola or Tesla plan, this thing's brand new. The meetings today are private and brand new. But the conflicts are already a problem. There's a company as well, Trump.org. You might recall, whatever you think about the whole year we lived through, there was a fair process with a jury and a system that found that was a company doing fraud. Donald Trump also pocketed millions in foreign payments from the first term. Again, a conflict of interest, something no other president in either party had done, because no other president insisted on trying to operate active businesses that took money from anywhere, let alone foreign governments. And then there's the second term issues. The New York Times has been reporting that basically, based on what happened in the first term, which had a lot of ethics problems and scandals, a lot of agency heads that Trump picked were pushed out and ultimately basically held to account in ways that he was not and lost their jobs. We did a big report on that heading into the election. And now they're planning fewer ways to have guardrails, which you can interpret as concern about the past scandals, that they just don't want to deal with the headache, or that they are basically saying it's open season for all kinds of people to use the government for personal gain. Again, that doesn't help workers. That doesn't deal with the price election, the inflation election we just went through. MAGA allies, meanwhile, big picture, separate from those Trump ethics issues, say they want to cut the safety net. And then they want to also shift resources by cutting the safety net, but then taking money from those programs and effectively over time shifting them to the wealthiest Americans through more millionaire and billionaire tax cuts. And so some of the final polls before the election did show, as I mentioned, Donald Trump ultimately edging out Harris by 7 points on handling the economy and, again, all the prices concerns. But these are the plans. We're past what I call that good news for Republicans in the campaign, and we're getting towards the governing. And Trump's bringing in these billionaires also directly in the administration. Musk wants to have it both ways. He wants to oversee government spending while still getting a lot of government spending, but not taking a kind of job, because he knows, he's a sharp, shrewd operator, that if he did what some of these folks are doing going into the second term, they would then be subject to even more rules and oversight, and they would be government employees. He's not doing that, but these others are. And so they may have their own billionaire ideas about priorities. But you have to keep your eye on what they're doing, not just on the branding, the Musk, Doge, Tesla government plans and the talk of saving you money, when the person doing that talk and the other billionaires seem to be pretty good at one thing, amassing their own wealth through any which way they have to, including the countries, often many countries that they deal with, government contracts, tax codes, and the rest. And if that's what they're known for, you have to ask, do you believe them and the incoming Trump administration that campaigns so much on working class values, that they are going to switch from what they've been doing their whole lives, amassing wealth for themselves, and suddenly put all of that effort to amassing what? Wealth for someone else? Wealth for you? And wealth for you at their expense?
One of the clarifying aspects of your introduction to this is the connection between the individuals who are now running the oversight of these programs and the government to fix it and to make it better, and how they're going to be impacted. So my question to Elon Musk is, so are you cutting back on your government contracts, the amount of government money that's being spent for your benefit, for your personal wealth and growth? In the programs that you're doing, you're trying to get to Mars. So do we, need to cut back on that? Because I'm sure there's a lot of waste in that program that you're collecting $1 billion check from, right? So that's the reality here for us. But the reality for him is, let's look at Medicaid and SNAP programs. Let's look at education and childcare programs. Not the things that affect me, because I don't have any child I need to care for, and I damn sure are not on SNAP, right? That's not my issue. My issue is I collect $1 billion a month from what I'm doing. This family is collecting $100 a month for what they're doing. And so that's the balancing act that the Trump administration is going to have to confront. And the Republicans in the House and the Senate, Ari, who now manage all of that and in control of that, that's the governing part, right? We're going to have to realize that a lot of the programs they want to cut affect the people who live in the very red states and districts that they represent. Don't believe me. After the election, all these Republicans love putting up that big red map, how red the country was, right? Well, let's start cutting and see how much blood you take from those red districts in those red states.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, here's the New York Times report, and there have been many about this, basically saying Republicans are actually going to probably oppose some of these so-called, they call them, the Times called it Biden's triumphs. You can call it domestic spending. Trump supporters expressed concern about how the potential rollbacks of some of these laws, including green and other programs that basically did what you just mentioned, put funding into red districts, how that could affect job losses, hurt companies. Again, at the baseline level of the workers that we heard so much about in the election, not the billionaires who are going to get this tax windfall while they claim to oversee the government.
Keep in mind, guys like Elon Musk and even Vivek Ramaswamy, and certainly a lot of the folks who are coming into this administration have all been takers. They've never managed a government budget. They've never had to run a city. They've never had to manage a state and balance trash collection against educational programs and healthcare programs. Elected officials are elected to sit there and make those hard choices and explain to people why. So when Elon Musk said, yes, there will be pain associated, pain for who? Not you, bro. You're not feeling this. You've never felt it. You have never felt what it's like to have a food stamp program cut and all of a sudden you can't shop where you wanted to shop or buy the food you need, or have your health care taken from you or reduced, and then wonder whether or not you'll be able to continue the level of medication that you have for your mom or yourself. You've never had those concerns. So why are you the one making those choices? You're unelected. It's not even a real department. It's all made up. This is voodoo BS. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of people with Republican backing and support who are going to be hurt by this.
Biden commuted and pardoned over 1,500 people in one day, being the highest pardon in one day in history of the country, and announced there are more to come. And he has been combing through and trying to pardon those that were wrongfully charged or those who got stricter sentencing simply from being black. Countless other reasons, trying to right the wrongs of our past however he can in the final days of his presidency. And such a sharp contrast, as Trump said repeatedly that he would pardon the violent MAGA cultist insurrectionists that desecrated our Congress halls and Senate halls and the Capitol building, as they bludgeoned Capital City police to the point where some have now lost their eyesight, others are paralyzed, and several are no longer here as they were killed, literally defending the Capitol building and trying to protect the lawmakers they swore to protect. These violent insurrectionists are traitors and enemies of the people, which he calls very fine people, or hostages. This is just sickening and disturbing. Just like him trying to push a completely false mischaracterization of the whole tragedy. And some of these police were so upset and messed up with the whole situation that they even committed suicide days later. This is a bloody and sick day that will forever stain the timeline of our country, and we must be sure that the facts remain known and that these attempts to whitewash and sugarcoat and rewrite history are unsuccessful, because we must be sure to never let these actions occur again. And frankly, one of the most disturbing things about Trump wanting these violent insurrectionists out on day one is because he wants his mentally deranged foot soldiers out and free to once again be menaces to society and to bring violence and chaos like the barbarians they are. And frankly, I haven't heard anyone really speaking about why he would want them out on day one and why he would do and say all the things that he's been saying. Most of them just think it's politically motivated. However, I think it's more sinister. These idiots have already proven that they will throw it all away at the single direction of their cult leader, like the brain-dead, sleepwalking bottom feeders they are. I think it's important that people realize, out of all things that he could do for the American people and all of the broken promises that he's made along the way in the campaign trail, both 8 years ago and once again for the last 4 years on his 4-year campaign. Speaking about groceries to the point where it almost seemed like it was a new word to him, one he's never used before, much like he's probably never been to a grocery store, which is why he says, it's a beautiful word. Groceries, whatever the fuck that means. Excuse me. Whatever that means. I don't think it's a beautiful word, and frankly, it's a necessity for life. And instead of playing games with the people and pointing out the obvious that prices are high, mostly because of his failures last term. So his whole time campaigning, he kept promising that he would bring down the prices, including that he would bring down the prices on everything, including groceries. Now he's walking that back, saying that once things go up, it's hard to bring the prices back down. So in other words, he played all of the MAGA minions whom are too ignorant to fact check and clearly too ignorant to understand the basics of economics, or the fact that Trump and his billionaire oligarch buddies are the reason inflation and prices are so high to begin with. And of course, they're going to stay high. In fact, they're going to come in and make changes that are going to blow inflation through the roof, including those 20% Trump national sales tax, aka the tariffs, that will drive prices up even higher. But even as Time magazine catered to the ego of Donald Trump, they went on to report that Trump himself said that once the prices go up, they're almost impossible to bring back down. So he is quoted on record, and yet many of his staunchest supporters, they don't read Time magazine. They don't even know what's going on. Oh, Lord, help us. Representative Bush urges her caucus and government to do better. From her final speech on the House floor, and speaking the truth to the congressional leaders that will represent the next Congress, as she was pushed out at a time when more voices like hers are needed, frankly. And these corrupt elites keep funding these Republicans to push their agendas. And frankly, there's too much corporate money and greed in these elections. And frankly, there should be more laws and regulations about elections and campaigns. At this point, these corrupt 1% elites keep funneling hordes of money into these races, even local state races, to play sycophants and remove the serious individuals that fight for the American people instead of fighting for these corporate elites. Frankly, Trump has now invited many of these individuals to have a seat at the table and even cabinet positions making policies. Watch this clip.
Being in Congress is a privilege. Don't waste it and don't settle. Don't say, well, we tried. Don't abuse the power we've been afforded to make a difference in people's lives. The people are depending on you to show up for them and their need. You have the power to change the world, so don't sit on that power. Use it to do good deeds and to save and transform lives. We are the United States of America. We are the wealthiest and most powerful country in the world, so we can't act like the court jester. So do better.
That was Congresswoman Cori Bush of Missouri delivering her final speech on the House floor, urging her colleagues in the lower chamber to, quote, do better. The Democratic caucus is losing a young, progressive woman of color from a working class background at a time when that is exactly the kind of voice they need more of as the party grapples with how to move forward after this year's election. And Congresswoman Cori Bush joins me now. Congresswoman, it is so good to see you.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you, too.
Thank you. Your message was powerful today. Say more. What do you think this party, where do you think it has erred, and where do you think it can do better?
So one major area is continuing to allow corporate money in Democratic primaries, continuing to allow billionaires to dictate who the elected representative will be. That's a big problem. The big money in politics is a problem already, yeah. but to sit back knowing that billionaires are going to decide, not the people.
I'm just looking at my notes here. AIPAC, which is a very powerful lobbying organization, spent at least $8.6 million to defeat you. That made you the second most expensive House primary, the second most expensive House primary of the year. Of course, number one was Representative Jamal Bowman. The same organization spent more than $14 million to unseat him, and they got their result they wanted in both of those races at a time when there are still, 45,000 people who have died in Gaza. You've called for that. There's some sign that maybe a ceasefire is coming soon. What do you think is the future of being able to stand up for the dignity of people in Palestine when that kind of targeting is successful?
Yeah, and that's one of the problems, is because what we don't want is for people to feel that I can't speak up and I can't stand, and be true to my values. And we're talking about saving lives here. That's the thing. We're not talking about, how much it's going to cost to get from point A to point B. We're talking about saving humans. And so it shouldn't be controversial, but it is. And actually, let me add that Jamal Bowman's race was it ended up being the most expensive race in U.S. history. Mine ended up being the second most expensive race in U.S. history. There was $15 million spent to unseat me total when you add all of the different groups together. That should not be allowed in the United States. And so what we're looking at is not only people in Gaza. We're looking at what's happening in Lebanon. We're looking at, and then look at Haiti, look at Congo, look at Sudan. Jamal Bowman and I were fighting for people to have access to clean water, clean air. We were working to make sure that people had housing who are unsheltered. Our work was for the working everyday person, our disabled community members, all people who need us the most. Our work was not to destroy or divide. Our work was to heal.
And that goes for the U.S. as well. Obviously, the reality is you talk about your working class background, you talk about dealing with, sexual assault, et cetera, and dealing with poverty, dealing with living in your car. You've given that story. We now have billionaires in charge of the government. They're talking about doing things like tariffs, which will make things very expensive for working people. There's a threat for abortion rights. You now have Texas, the Attorney General of Texas, suing New York to try to stop even just the ability for women in Texas to get access to the abortion pill. And you are one of the people who's sponsoring, trying to get the Equal Rights Amendment finally ratified. What's the status of that?
So, I need people to understand that medication abortion, especially when we're talking about Texas, medication abortion is the most common form of abortion in the country. When us pushing for the ERA, I led a letter alongside Representative Ayanna Pressley with 120 of our colleagues urging the president to certify and publish the ERA because the time is now. That it's overdue. 101 years. We've been pushing for this. And so he has a few more weeks left in the presidency. We need him to get this done because we know the harm that could come with this Donald Trump presidency and this administration. But what people don't often think about is the ERA is more than abortion rights. It's more than reproductive freedom.
It's equal rights for women, period.
For women, period. And so closing the gender wage gap, making sure that we fight sexual harassment in the workplace, violence against women, all of those things, discrimination in healthcare and in education. We need that now. And Joe Biden is in the position to do it. And let me say this, the Archivist of the United States is the one who would certify and publish, and the president would sign it. The archivist said that, that she does not plan to move forward, but the archivist is basically a librarian.
Yeah.
She does not get to decide what goes in the Constitution or not.
Yeah. Let's talk about the what I've called the gerontocracy, what one might call the gerontocracy of the Democratic Party. Younger voices like yourself, like Ayanna Pressley, like AOC, obviously. She was pushed out. She was booted from she lost her bid for a top committee seat. It is said that and reported that Speaker Pelosi was one of the people. Jasmine Crockett also went for a seat, did not get it. You're seeing.
Thank you for watching my video. Hopefully you learned some new things you didn't already know. I have much more coming as well. So be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Check that notification bell for all the latest updates. And as always, be kind to yourself and be kind to others. Thank you. Also, if you enjoyed this video, drop a smiley face in the comments below. And if you have any requests or want me to do a video on a certain topic or subject, leave it in the comments below. I always respond as well. Thank you again and have a blessed day. And happy holidays from Exposed News Outlet. And have a safe New Year.